Welcome everyone to the Feminine Outliers podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Cholwe Mandona
and Zelda Wasau,
and we are excited to have you here with us. So, welcome back. It's great to have another episode. And it's this episode is going to be on religion. Yeah. There is so much to talk about this on this episode. So we're going to dive in right after we tell you what we have been unlearning this week. So I'll give the baton to Zell. What have you been unlearning this week?
So I've been unlearning the need to respond to everything that happens around you or to you. Basically, I'm unlearning needing to respond. I am learning that not everything requires actual response, that silence is on its own a response and can be a very powerful response. So if someone does something that might irritate you, or there might be something that's not clarified, you don't necessarily have to respond all the time. Sometimes just keeping quiet and just moving on in your life actually really gives a strong impression. Like, someone is like, that silence is a killer. Like, they know, well, you've just chosen to ignore, so there must be something there. It's like, silence is powerful on its own. Because I know at work, there was a bit of a miscommunication with, I asked the case manager, was like, oh, hey, can you put in the discharge order for this patient? And basically, the discharge order had been in for the past 2 hours. So I literally wrote on the chart, and this is a group chat with many people, that the discharge order has been in. That's what I wrote. And the reason why I wrote that is because I usually, how when people, one of the things I've realized in the hospital is that sometimes the nurses and some of these people don't check their orders. And I cannot physically text everyone and tell you that I've put in this and that order. I don't have the time to do that. Unless it's an urgent order, I'm most likely not going to text you and tell you. So you need to refresh your computer and check your orders. A lot of times they don't do that. So they'll ask you, literally the nurses will text you and be like, can I have this medication? Or you didn't add this medication. The order has been in for some time. They just didn't check. And so usually how I respond is like, yeah, it's in. I'll be like, yes, knowing that I already put it in. But now I make the point to realize that I put this order in. I write that nicely. I put this order in 2 hours ago, and I use smiley face, so that they start to think, refresh my computer, refresh my page, check and see what happened before I reach out to the doctor, because it wastes my time when I go log in and I realize this order is already in. So essentially, when she asked me that, I said the discharge order has been in. And the nursing leader basically wrote on the chart, yeah, but it would have been nice if you had messaged us at 7:15 and told us that the order is in. That way we could have gotten working on this, getting this patient out, because it was a complicated discharge. Something along the lines. And this nursing manager kind of pisses me off sometimes, because I know he tries to do his best to get the patients out. Like, he's really trying to get his metrics on board. Like, dude wants, his patients out before 11. He wants to have the perfect, admin record. But that means also pushing the doctors around a bit. So, like, being like, hey, doc, can you please discharge the patient before 11? Hey, doc, this is happening. Hey, doc, what's the plan? Hey, doc, what's the plan? I'm not going to lie. I just ignore the crap out of those messages, because if it's if it's interfering with my ability to think, I just stop it. So when he wrote that message, I just was like, I didn't respond. I saw it, and he can see on the group chat that I saw it and I read it, but I did not respond. I just kept moving because that was this Monday, and I was like dying. I told you I came back home at 11 p.m.
Mm.
So it was such a busy day. I mean, that was around the time my other patient unfortunately died. So I was just like, I
Mm.
have no time to deal with this, and he can just think about my silence and why I'm not responding. You know. So
Mm.
and it's funny because I listened on YouTube, I think later on Tuesday or something, how there was like sometimes silence is just all you need. You don't have to respond to everything. And
Mm.
be it good or bad. I know now I'm talking about something that relatively annoyed me, but even if it's something good, I mean, you don't necessarily have to respond. Silence is
Mm.
a response on its own and it can do what is needed. And sometimes that prevents you from actually responding in a way that you may regret because it makes you stop and think. So I definitely, it's
Mm.
something that got me thinking. And I was like, huh, good lesson to learn slash unlearn. But yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I I haven't thought about it that way. About it's a better solution to saying something that you might regret. I like that. Um because the thing with silence, or the issue that I've had with it, is that when people are silent, it can be taken personally, that you're not acknowledging the person. So,
Mm,
like in this particular situation, this person was requesting something from you. You saw the text and you didn't respond. And I think in your mind, it was, it wasn't something that you needed to respond to, because, the system is in place to take care of itself. So, but it's coming from that viewpoint of, I have said something and you have not acknowledged it. And you're making me now empathize with people that, maybe get overwhelmed with emotions and they can't verbalize how they feel. Like they don't have that emotional confidence, or intelligence rather, to be able to say, hey, I've seen your text. I'm not going to work on this. I have something else I'm doing. Um, because I'm usually on the person that tries to verbalize something
hmm
and say, no, I'm not going to do this. Yes, I'm not going to do this. And actually, when people don't when people don't respond, there's a part of me that thinks it's rude. But then you're now making me realize that some people don't always have the emotional intelligence to deal with what their response would be. Like I'm happy with someone saying, "You asked me this and my answer is no." So, okay. I'm glad that you For me, I'm just glad that the person has been able to verbalize that, and we can close the matter. It doesn't it, the response doesn't have to be positive. It just is an acknowledgement. So, um I can see both sides to it. That's what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, that's so true. I mean, you've definitely put a different spin on it in the sense that, yeah, it's like how when you talk about the emotional intelligence to respond, but that's a slightly different than what I was talking about. For me, it's just that some things just simply do not require a response. Like,
Mm.
and you will know it in the moment. Like,
Mm.
it's not a matter of your emotional intelligence. It's just, do you have to react to this? Do you have to do this? Do you have to do that? And sometimes it's better to just not react to do something. Yes, the
Mhm.
person on the other side might think about all those things, but maybe it also gives them time to think about their actions. I
Yeah. That's true.
mean,
That's true.
that's, yeah, kind of what I was saying. But the emotional intelligence bit, it's a good thing. Good thing to think about.
Yeah. I no, and I agree with you that silence is also a way of setting boundaries, because in that situation, if it was me, I think I would learn that Dr. Wasawa, is busy, and she won't respond to something of this nature. So then I would
Mm-hmm.
adjust my communication with you. So I think silence is a way to set boundaries. So that's, you'd hope that the person doesn't keep doing the same thing over and over, and actually see a trend that you don't respond to certain messages. So I don't see anything wrong with that on there. So
Yeah, this could be a whole other topic. Ooh, we have something else to talk about in the future.
yeah. Yeah, we do need to talk. We definitely do need to talk about emotional intelligence, and
Mm-hmm.
self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So stay tuned, guys. Coming up. Um, um, okay. So for me, what I am unlearning is that, to not to not listen to environmental factors, uh, to give you an idea of what the situation is really like. Instead,
Hmm.
you can you can, you have a powerful mind where you can decide the conclusion of the situation you're in. Um, because I've noticed that there are some people, I mean, it's just very common actually. It's not even some people, but it's common for people to, maybe, let's say, wake up in the morning and they say, "Oh, it's raining, so I can't go to this place," or "I was planning to go to, the whatever it is, even the grocery store, supermarket, hanging out with my friends, but it just feels like one of those days where I'm just going to sit in, or just not do much." Um and I've come to realize that, to me, that's what makes the difference with people that are, like, successful, and I know success is subjective, but people that end up getting what they want versus people that don't is people that, tend to get what they want. They control how they view their environment. They
Hmm.
realize, oh, like, they realize that their environment is not actually determining the outcomes they want. It's just there. And yes, do they have to maybe, ha- put extra effort to get things done? Yes, but they would rather do that than make the excuse that the reason why they couldn't get something done was because of something outside of them. Um, and so I'm coming to learn that. And there are so many reasons and excuses I can give as to why I shouldn't do something, like a ton of them. Um, but I'm realizing that those reasons are those reasons are not as big as the way my mind is. Like, if I put my mind to something and do it, come rain or sunshine or whatever other issues are out there, you will get it done. Um, and I have to obviously keep in mind that there's context to it. Like, I'm not gonna run a marathon if I'm really sick. Like, that's not how it works. But yeah, but I would probably still go out there if it was just, oh, I thought of the rain, like carry an umbrella, like wear a rain jacket. Um, and life right now has just become so sophisticated that there's a lot of the excuses that people would have in the past have been taken away. Um, and now it's just a matter of the difference between successful people and not successful people are people who just take action. So that is my unlearning. and learning for this week?
Hmm. But you know, even though we have the in the past, the you're saying like some of the problems or issues were taken away, but they were replaced with new ones.
That's
It's not,
true.
there's also new ones that are more relevant for today that might not have been relevant before.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
in that same breath, what you're saying is so it's so you. It's so typical Choi, but it's such a good it's such a good lesson because I think a lot of times we just let our environment dictate a lot of things. Now, granted, your environment can make things harder for you to do. And if it's
Exactly, I agree.
if it's becoming extremely hard for you to accomplish certain goals because of your environment, then it's time for you to think of an environment change that will help put you in a better position to achieve your goals. But as Chole just said, that should not be the end all be all of you not achieving your goals. You should still
Mhm.
work at achieving your goals, but then it will be harder, it might require more effort. But a part of the effort might be, hey, I actually have to switch my environment around to actually
Mhm.
do be more efficient, to do a better job at whatever goal it is that I'm trying to achieve. Because
Mhm.
and I think a big thing that that entails with the whole environment thing is wanting your environment to be wanting the perfect or ideal environment for doing whatever it is you want to do. A lot of
Yeah.
times in life, as it's not going to be the ideal environment. So if you keep on waiting around for everything to perfectly align up for you, you'll be waiting and keep waiting.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's what's really important with what you said. Successful people will just make the most of what they have. If they need to change something, they will. But in the meantime, they will honestly just go about using the tools they have in the current environment to help them prosper. And it's something that I have definitely been working on because I'm like, do I have to wait for like this kind of schedule, this kind of place for me to do X, Y, and Z? And I realized I will never do it if I keep on wanting everything to align perfectly in my environment and things that entail with it. So I really like that. It's just
Exactly.
it's like a get your life together kind of unlearning. I
Yeah.
like it.
I'm coming after everyone, including myself. But I just realize it even more now, as I keep practicing. I'm realizing like, wow, if I stuck at that excuse, then I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now. So
Hmm.
just a reminder there. So yeah. Okay. So all right. Nice unlearnings. Really good. And now we're going to transition into our topic of the week, and we are looking at religion, the power of religion. I'm not even sure how we're going to title this episode. Let's see where we end up because religion is deep. Just saying.
It is.
It's deep, and I do want to acknowledge that it's very fundamental to people's lives. A lot of people, and in fact, people identify with their religions very strongly. So, but I think that's the reason why it's worth talking about. Um, Particularly seeing that we both grew up. You grew up in Kenya, I grew up in Zambia, and early on, I was exposed to or became part of Christianity. My family are Christians, and that's the same for you, Zell, right? I guess I know
Hmm.
that. I don't know why I'm like, yeah, like, yeah, actually, that's true. So we're both raised in Christian families, and it would be interesting to talk about how that has shaped us. I mean, honestly, it's very interesting when it comes to growing up in a Christian household because I didn't have time to not think of of not being Christian. Um,
Mm,
because growing up, I was, you're young, and when you're, I don't know, I can't even remember how old I was. Um, I was put in Sunday school. Like, I don't know if you had Sunday school, like on
mm-hmm,
Sundays. Yeah, so it's like, Sunday school, and then I went to a Catholic all girls school. So my childhood really started with Christianity very young. So I didn't know anything else outside Christianity.
mm,
And and I grew up that way, and I was at a Catholic school for 9 years until the last 3 years of high school. I went to a non-Catholic school. It was just a co-ed school, and there was no, yeah, there were no Christian principles or rituals being practiced. So it felt, like a just a regular school. So, I mean, no, I'm not saying that Christian schools are not regular, but it was just without the principles of Christianity being emphasized. So, yeah, and that was actually, I noticed the difference. Um, People just seemed freer and expressive. Um, and and then I came out to the US, where I continued to practice my Christian faith. So, but coming to the United States, I started to see differences and just how people lived their Christian life versus the Christian life back home. And it put me into this journey of exploration of like, what does it really mean? Why am I a Christian? Why am I following
mm,
this faith? And I've been on this journey actually for quite some time. Um, and obviously, being exposed to different cultures, you realize that, oh, there is Islam, like, and not just experiencing it from like thinking of it as a religion or something I studied in school, but actually having friends who are Muslims and interacting with them on a daily basis and seeing how they practice their faith, and then going on to make other friends who are Buddhists, and I also learned about Sikhism, for example. That's another religion. So I just started to get exposed and kind of and think through like, wow, what is the essence of religion? And here we are today talking about it on this podcast. But yeah, um, how about you, Zell? Any thoughts on this?
So growing up, I mean, I grew up in a Christian household, and my parents were both very active in church. My dad was an elder in the church, and he
Mm,
also was part of the board of, I don't know, directors or some kind of board that keeps things in line in the church. Like if they had to discipline a pastor, he's on that
mm,
board. He was a part of
okay.
that board. Um, so, and our church was, Satan Ministries, and it was really fast growing. Like now, when I hear all the places it's at, I'm like, wow, Satan has grown so big. So, like my dad being an elder, my mom was also very active with like kids stuff, like teaching, um, and like all the as Sholbe had, I also had to go to Sunday school every Sunday, and then also during the vacations, would go for DVS, um, daily vacation, no DBS, daily vacation Bible school. Okay, something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Something like that. Yeah, we
Something
get
like
it. Yep.
that. And during the summers, and
Mm,
because my parents were like, really important in the church and stuff like that. Like I'd always do things like, be part of the singing crew, um, like part of like the singing leaders, like for the kids up there with the mic in the church. So because my parents were very active, they also prompted us to be really active in church. Like
Mm.
going to missing church on a Sunday was so unheard of. Like we were going to church, even if we go on vacation. My parents were the type who would look for a church when we're on vacation. And in my head, I used to be like, "What's the point? Like, can we just stay and swim?
Mm.
Like, if that's all I wanted to do, stay and swim and enjoy my life." But my parents would be like,
Mm.
"We're going to church," and I don't remember learning anything specifically. I just
Mhm.
felt like we had to go to church. Uh, it was like expected of us. And I also had to, when I became a teenager, also help teaching the kids, because I think it was kind of because my parents also expected it, because they were like, "Hey, so and so, your friend from church is doing this. You should do this too." It's kind of like an unspoken expectation. So it also help, um, like in different activities in church.
Mm.
Um, So, and whenever we'd go for family functions, because my dad was an elder in his church, my parents would always be the ones asked to pray over the food, or do the final
Mm.
prayer of blessings before we leave, like to go back home for the family functions. So that was just very regular for me. My parents obviously tried to, for us to continue the faith at home. I think like every so often it would come and go. Would have like family Bible study at home and things like that. So
Mm.
church was a really and Christianity was just a really big thing for my parents growing up. They made it a big thing for us. It's really funny though, because given the fact that my parents were all about everything about the Christian faith, tell me why
Mhm.
my first high school, it was a British high school, but it was a British high school with primarily Muslims, people of the Islam faith. Like
Interesting. Yeah.
it had a mosque attached to, like, right next to the school.
Oh.
There is a
Yeah.
very no like most of the people who went there are either like um Iranian, Pakistani, Palestinian, Somali, name it, Middle Easterns, people from Muslim countries. It was just funny when I think about it. Like, why did my parents? What my parents were actually comfortable with me going there, knowing that it was primarily um, of people of Islam faith, is really interesting.
Mm.
But that was my first high school, and then my second high school, which was just my last year of high school after I graduated from the British. I did my GCSEs because I was too young to come to college. My parents were like, "Okay, let's do an extra year," and they took me to an American high school, which is a Christian high school. So now this
Mm.
was more of the type of school I would think my parents would take me to, because it was very much based in the Christian faith. Would have like um not like church, but like I don't remember what it's called. But sometimes in the morning would have like go sing like songs and things like that. So it was more so like based Christian faith based. And it's funny because I do remember when I had the 1 year I had left, um
Mm.
my parents were trying to think about where I should go. I really wanted to go to a school called Brookhouse.
Mm.
But Brookhouse just built a castle that resembled Hogwarts, the Harry Potter
Mm.
castle. Like
Okay.
legit, the
Mm.
school looked so cool. So in my head, I was like, "Oh, I want to go there because that looks so cool." And my mom was
Yeah.
like, "No, Harry Potter is of the devil. You're not going to
Yeah.
that school." I remember that. Sorry, mom, if you
Yeah.
listen. That's what I remember her saying, and I was just like, in my head, I'm like, really? Like,
Yeah.
that's why I couldn't go to that school. I still wish I was able to go to that school because it'd be so cool to study in a castle. Anyways,
Mhm.
it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So when I came to the US, I because of all these, growing up in a, I wouldn't say it's a strict home, but it's a semi-strict, like, with a Christian faith kind of. place, I knew my mom would expect me to like join Bible study, go to church, and do all that stuff. So I joined the Navigators because my mom was part of the Navigators in Kenya. So I joined the Navigators
Yeah.
on campus, and I'd go for Bible
Yes.
study with them. And they were really nice girls. I really enjoyed actually meeting with them. But I'm not gonna lie, now the person who I've become today, I think all of them but one is are the only people. There's only one who I'd actually really be friends with today, and she also happens to be the other international girl from Indonesia.
Mm.
Like, the others, I don't know if I'd really still be friends with them today. Like it's just, and it's not like we don't like each other. It's just different. I don't know, likes, dislikes, just different life paths. So the what
Mm.
was really holding us together was that we had Bible study together, and I
Mhm.
joined in like navigator events and stuff like that. So, and part of me doing that was also because I felt like my mom would ask, and I felt like I needed to be like, yeah, I need to tick off this box, tick off that box, and
Mhm.
let her know I've actually done this. But when I
Mhm.
came to medical school, I did join the Christian Student Association, but this one was the first one I really loved and I enjoyed it. And I think the
Mm.
reason why I loved it and enjoyed it, I mean, I didn't have time for Bible study because I'm not going to lie, in medical school, we were just hashtag dying of exhaustion. But when I go to
Mm.
church, like this is a very international like group. Like my campus is very international. So I think that was part of the reason why I loved it. It
Mhm.
was so international because when I did the navigators in Miami, you know how Miami, I don't know if you knew this, but at the time, Miami was listed as the fifth least diverse university of its size in the US.
Mm.
I mean, which we shouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised because we
Yeah.
we grew up, we went to Miami, so we know how it
It
is.
was us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt like
Ah.
I was with like Americans in Miami who were not really the most. They don't really know what's out there, you know.
Yeah.
They're open to it because they're like, "Oh, it's so cool, you're from Kenya and this and that," but they're just it's this I know a little bubble. So when I
Yeah.
went to the CSA and to Georgia's, I really enjoyed it to be honest because this was people from everywhere. I really enjoyed those events. I
Mhm.
loved that.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
go there every Sunday, but because I enjoyed it, I really enjoyed going there, and that was part of the part. So where I met Fifi, I don't know, but we'd also go there with Fifi. So that's kind of my
Mm.
background. It's interesting though, because now my transition, it's been really interesting because when I went to the UK, I didn't go to church because I was there for 4.5 months, and I was like, I'm not finding one.
Mm.
When I came back to New York, I went to Hillsong, which I actually really enjoyed Hillsong, and I miss it.
Mhm.
But then I moved for residency. That's when going to church just kind of fell off the bandwagon because hello, I might be working on Sunday or Saturday or Sunday may be my
Mhm.
only day off, and things just took an interesting turn.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. There's just so many thoughts that are going through my head as you're speaking. Um, and the first one that comes to my mind is the when you said, growing up, you didn't really get it. Because I think for me, I was doing it out of obedience, like with my parents, and
Yeah.
it was one of those things of where, um, I was doing things out of obedience. And to be fair, there are times where it was like I knew I was going to get like a free lunch after church. If we
Actually,
I
that's a
know.
motivation.
I know. Like if my mom was like, "We're going to Nando's. We're going to Nando's after church." I'm like, "Okay, let's wrap this thing up. Like let's go to church. Let's do this." And then after that, I'm gonna get my Nando's. But it was, I think, also because it was like being a child. It was like I was trying to probably find my identity within the church circles, and there's
Hmm.
al- there's just so much like, okay, I knew like this is the Bible, and I kind of knew the basics, like, okay, there's Jesus, there's God, the Holy Spirit. So I knew the basics, but I never fully grasped. And so things were just going, just beyond me. And so it was just, and it became a ritual. Like we talked about Sunday school. I think for me it was even Saturday. I can't remember if it was Saturday school, but anyway, it became a ritual, and it never fully stuck with me even when I became an adult. I just knew that this is something I do, like, oh, you go to church on Sundays. um and that was that's very interesting that you talked about how you enjoyed the international gatherings when you went for medical school, because I s- I started to, because even for me right now, the church that I go to is very diverse, and I love that. But that's like, it infuses my personality and my interest in different cultures
Mm-hmm.
with, I with my respect and belief in God. So it's been very interesting exploring that. And you mentioned Hillsong, and I like Hillsong songs. Um, and even when I listen to those songs, they help me connect better with, with reflection and meditation, unlike the traditional songs that would be sang in like Catholic churches. So
The hymns.
the hymns, exactly, the hymns. And like, to me, it would just be like, I could see like the passion and people's talent in singing these hymns, but I wasn't really connecting again with those things. And the
Mm-hmm.
other part is that I also started to have those questions of like logical, like, okay, you know and obviously, being, a person that is like a thinker, a logical thinker, like, you start to think like, okay, wow, how did Jesus do this? Like, is this for real? um and usually the churches would tell you, just believe, have faith, but I also have another side to me. um and honestly, it's been it's been a learning curve for me, because trying to find my identity, because I think my parents just thought, okay, we have this intention to expose our child or our children to the Christian faith because of the quote unquote good elements of it. And they started really early. But at the same time, it didn't really account, not to their own fault. But what if you don't get it? What if you don't get it, even though you've been going to church for so long, and I still can't find my identity in it? And I think that's a bit of a struggle, especially when it's like forced upon you without you recognizing that this is something you identify with it, or it's something you need. So it's been an interesting journey, just with that,
Mm-hmm.
as you yeah.
You know, I, one thing you said that resonates with me somewhat is talking about how, as a child, that's kind of like, you kind of like not given an option. Like
Yeah.
that's the options that's presented to you. And I must say, my parents, I can give them props to the sense that they really tried to help us really work on our own individual relationships with God. And they really encourage that. So, really live it, live what you're, live the faith. But I also felt like part of me didn't have an option. It was like,
Mm,
you live in this house, we're going to church on Sunday, every Sunday. Like, it just seemed like if you miss a Sunday, a church, going to church on Sunday, it just seemed so, oh my goodness. Like, and for me, the questions started coming in when we were on vacation. And I'm like, why do we have to go to church when we're on vacation?
mm,
Because frankly speaking, when I was in those time periods, I told you I would much rather be swimming. I'm very
mm,
much a fish in the water, and I love my swimming. And then my mom is like, "We're going to church," and I'm just like, "Why?"
mm,
That's, I
mm,
think, when I started having those questions. And I realized certain things that we do, and when I look back
Mhm.
now that I've actually been here in the West, that are just very routine
Mhm.
and just part of the culture that we do it as Christians. You're expected to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't know why we do them the way we do them.
Yes.
Like, and I started to question that. And I think back then I didn't have as many questions because you're living at home. Like, you know, you have to do what your parents want you to do. It's when you
Yeah.
leave and you start looking back, and then you're like, yeah, like what, but why?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And so it's almost you said something that resonates with me about this idea of like, is it the practice of the Christian faith or is it the practice of a culture? Because that's what I didn't understand. And I want to
Mm,
say that like it to me it seemed like it was what I call cultural Christians, where you grow up in a culture that has, practices the Christian faith, but it's not that like people have identified their like relationship with God, and they're faithfully walking through that path. It's more like, yeah, I go to church on Sundays because that's what I did every day. Um and like I remember, I don't know where I got this from, or maybe I've seen this on social media, or maybe just in conversations, when if somebody was trying to say, it's trying to give you advice to select a partner, for example. And if they would say, look for somebody that goes to church on Sunday, or if they go to church on Sunday, they're a good person. And
mm.
I'm like, interesting. Is that really the thing? Because like to me, I couldn't distinguish. Like initially I was like, is that the measure of someone's goodness? Because what
Mm.
if they are just culturally Christian? They just did it every day, but they never actually connected with the faith. Um, and so that that's a thing that I had. I just couldn't distinguish between culture and religion and faith.
But can we, in general? Like, I feel like looking back, you and me can probably say, maybe this was cultural because we've experienced Christianity and faith in the Western world, and we've seen also how they practice it differently in certain aspects.
Mm,
I definitely think some of
mm-hmm.
it was culture, but do we realize it back home? Because
Good point.
some, because one of the things I find very unsettling about religion back home is that people just don't question things. There's a
Mm,
reason why religion is so prosperous in Africa, and part of it is because people just don't question it. Do they?
mm-hmm,
Part of it is maybe you're not actually reading the word of, if you're Christian, not reading the Bible yourself. If you're not,
mm-hmm,
if you're just listening to your pastors and letting them tell you what it is that should happen. Pastors are humans. We forget they're human beings and that they make mistakes as well. They're not perfect. But in
mm,
back home, it's like pastors are held to this pedestal that it's like they're so holier than thou. I'm like, no, they're human beings too. They might have a
mm-hmm,
better understanding of the Bible because they've studied it, but
mm-hmm,
it's just they're also human beings. But we don't have that. Like, it's just like routine. Like, you kind of expected to you do what you expected of you. Like, you also don't think outside of the box and be like, why are we doing this? Because I don't know how it is in Zambia, but in Kenya they
mm,
say 80% of people in Kenya are Christian. And in
mm,
general, it's very common to hear it coming up, like some form of faith creeping up into conversation in even like in politics. They'll be like, praise
mm,
God,
mm.
some of the politicians. Everyone will be like, amen. And, it
Yeah.
creeps up into the things like that. But it's because people, they know people want to hear that thing, and it makes them feel
Mhm.
more comfortable. And I don't know, it's like it kind of makes you look like you're very valid, a very valid person, or not. I don't know if it's valid, but just very, I don't know, trustworthy or something. Because they're like,
Trustworthy. Yeah.
yeah, and people just like, so it's like you have to know. And I think you were saying it, it's at one of our random conversations. I don't know if it's the lingo of a Christian, the Christian lingo, and how,
Mm.
it's works its way into our culture. And it just got me thinking about all those things. Okay, I don't know where I said it somewhere and I ended up at Christian lingo.
Yeah, no, that's no, I see what you're saying. You were talking about like people are not stopping to think. They're just really doing the ritual as opposed to just, like are people really stepping back to evaluate how it's serving them? And I think
Mhm.
my thought around that is because people are so identified with it, and also I I feel that like in back home there is a dependency on God in such a way that, like, whatever is going on in people's lives, they, I guess everyone has problems, but back home, where there are only so many, I don't know, I want to say, like, there are only so many moves you can make.
Mhm.
There is, especially with there's poverty, there's so much going on, so people are relatively stressed. There are a lot of stresses, and I think religion or the Christian faith is viewed as it's a tool, and it's not just a tool, people depend on it to continue to live in this atmosphere of positivity, of hope, of like something better is going to happen in the future. Because, when you look at the situations and they seem so dire, it's like, maybe it's just natural to want to give up and be depressed about it. But then people have the Christian faith. And so, because it helps them keep alive in a way, so they strongly identify with it. Um, but because they strongly identify with it, it's almost that thing that you continuously just practice it. So I know there are times when people have talked about how, like, people in some I've heard of situations where people go to church throughout the week. Like, Monday is prayer night, Tuesday is the bake sale, Wednesday is the prayer night for something else, and then Thursday is choir practice, Friday is kids time, like, like, people are literally revolving around um the Bible, and they're communing around this, li- almost like a livelihood.
Mhm.
um and it's different, I think, in the Western world, because in the Western world, it's, you mentioned the word relationship with God, where it's like you can have a respect and a belief in a higher deity like God, and you're like, okay, I'm a Christian, and these are my beliefs. But then there's also a bit of, it seems like there's a separation where it's like, okay, but now going to go to my job, and I'm now going to, if I'm unwell, I'm going to go to the doctor and see a doctor, and I'm going to do this. But I can see how, like, back home, if someone was unwell, they'll be like, no, you know what? I believe in God, and God said he will take care of me, and
Mhm.
there's so many scriptures where God says, he's going to look after his people. And people translate that, like, they literally identify with that statement, and then they decide not to go to the doctor because it's modern medicine, or it may not be something that God approves of. Um, and so I don't know how to balance that out.
Those, actually, you just opened a can of worms. Like, there's so much I have to say about some of those things. Like, Like the whole, I'll pray about it and I won't go to the hospital. I get where religion comes into play because it's also nice to have a higher power you believe in. In some way, it keeps people grounded.
Yeah.
Ironically, it does keep people grounded as human beings.
Mhm.
But again, when it takes the logic out of everything, I mean, I guess what some people will say is, in religion, Christianity, and stuff, sometimes you cannot think about something logically. It's just beyond your own comprehension.
Mm.
And fine, maybe that might happen in certain situations. Like maybe you'd call that a miracle.
Yes.
But
Exactly.
in general, we still have a brain, we still need to use it. And in the Bible, there's a verse that says, faith without works is dead. So you're
Mm.
sick, maybe the work part is get yourself to a doctor. Maybe pray to God that God will reveal to the your doctor, will help your doctor understand what is happening with you, what's ailing you, and know how best to help you.
Mhm.
It's like as you pray for healing, be practical as well. Because people just don't do that. People will sit there and be like, oh, I will get this job. I'm just going to pray for it. And then you're not looking for the job. So, how do
Mm.
you expect the job to come if you're just sitting there praying for it, but not actively also looking for the job? And I think that's
Mm.
something I don't know how it is in other parts of the world because I cannot speak to that. But I can speak to what I've seen in Kenya. That's a big problem I feel like I have with Christian faith because
Mhm.
people just assume, oh, I'm just going to pray, or someone will be like, oh, God will provide. Okay,
Mhm.
God will provide, but what are you also doing in your way? Like, I feel like God also blesses the work of your hands. So you also need to put in an effort yourself and try to do something on your end. Like, not just sit there and wait and be like, nope, God will provide. I see that all the time, in Kenya, and I'm just like, but why have we completely taken our brains out of this situation? And this
Mhm.
brings me to my other point, which let me know what you think about this. But
Mm.
it's someone on YouTube said that religion is um, the way to control the poor man.
Mm.
It's a way to control the poor man because
Mhm.
you need something higher to hope for. Maybe that's part of the reason why in Africa it's so booming because in general, even though our African continent is rich in resources and stuff, we have some of the poorest people.
Mm.
So people are suffering. So you need religion to look up to and stuff. If people know, hey, these people are, they need something more to look up to. Because tell me why churches in Africa are doing so well. And someone I saw this documentary, which I feel like it's like even poor people who don't have money, oh, they are always the ones giving tithe as well because they
Mm.
believe, they're going to be blessed when they give the tithe and everything. Like the churches keep going, and the poor people are actually the ones who keep them going because they really like fall deep into their religion. So, like in our case, we're talking about Christianity. They fall into it so deeply because that's what they
Mhm.
have to hope for. But I mean, that opinion is a bit polarizing to me, but I can see it happening because
Mm.
religion is such a good way to control people.
Mm.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. You actually reminded me. I saw something on, I think it was Instagram. I don't know how real it was. It may just have been someone putting something together, but the person was basically saying I think there was a preacher. I'm not sure which country, but there was a preacher that was telling his audience that he's like, I don't know whether he's the only person that's allowed to do this or something like that. That he was selling land in heaven. So basically, he was
Hmm. Hmm.
he was telling his audience that if you give, I think, a certain amount of money, he would secure some land in heaven. Um,
Uh-huh.
for them.
I can't. I absolutely cannot.
I know. And so he was collecting mortgages, I guess. I don't know, like he was collecting something in the name of like secure your land, like, Um and I thought in my head I was like, "Wait, I thought it's the land of milk and honey. Like what are we doing here?" Cuz you know that thing of where like if you're tired of paying your mortgage and you're like, when I go to heaven, these issues are no longer there. But this guy was telling his people that they can start purchasing land. So
And do they give money?
yeah, they give money.
You see,
So
they weren't thinking. So
yeah,
who is he paying in heaven that more like that money?
I yeah, I have no idea.
I
I'm not sure it.
cannot. This is exactly what I'm saying. It just takes the brain out of everything, and you can't leave your brain out. Your brain should also be intact and thinking at the same time. It should not just be your heart only, it should be your heart and your brain.
Yeah. No, and so yeah, and that's exactly, that's exactly it. Is the thing about it is that the I haven't read the Bible in its entirety. Um but to me what I get from it is I think the there's an abuse of this idea that you solely um live by what God says, and whatever is in the Bible, that doing anything that shows that you have quote unquote another idol other than God is bad. And so I think what these people prey on is that idea that, oh, if you don't give me money, then it means you don't have faith in God. And I think there's an
Mm.
abuse of that you should be able to, if you love God, you should be able to give up everything you have, literally give up everything you have, to show that you really, really do love God. And we have seen also that sort of extreme, like for example with extreme um Islamists, like where they say we're doing this for God. I think it was like with September 9/11. I think that was, I can't if I remember correctly. And
Mhm.
these, like people are saying, we're killing these people because we love God. And so I think there's that abuse, and people are just taking it to the extreme. So um and people, it's like maybe as human beings we're naturally seeking to do good, and unfortunately like religion is starting to abuse that because people feel like they have to give up everything if they're going to be really, really good. um and so almost as if trying to take away that like having desire is bad, like it's bad to
Mm.
want things. You should remove all desire and follow, and believe in your higher deity without any conditions. And I think people are taking advantage of that. There's a loophole there.
There's a lot of loopholes, and I mean that's all because also as you said, like as you read the Bible, that's another loophole in how people interpret the Bible
Yeah, yeah.
because different people interpret it differently, and it's based off your experiences, how you grew up, your biases, but it's also based on how people want it to be. Like
Mhm.
that's someone will skew it more to what they think is more beneficial. Because like, why are there so many? The Bible was done in a time when it was very patriarchal,
Mhm.
and so there's a lot of things in the Bible that you can think that are more leaning towards favoring men, for
Mhm.
example, or how they're like expressed and stuff. And then you'll find and but usually the Bible tends to be well balanced,
Mhm.
but someone will only find that verse that's favoring what they want, and they won't read the whole entire chapter
Mhm.
that balances the whole thing out and says, well, if this is what you do, but this is how, this is the balance, the counteract for that. People only read
Mhm.
like the little snippet they want to read, and then and say, well, this is what the Bible says, and this is what you should do. Because
Mhm.
we just other people, if you don't actually read the whole thing for yourself, you interpret the whole thing, and then that's how it kind of creates some kind of radicalism, but also just ignorance and a whole slew of things that comes in.
Mhm. Yeah. You know what you're reminding me of is how, speaking of interpretation, it's interesting growing up, or when just listening to some preachers, when they create this black and white scenario or good and bad scenario, where they would say, like, if you go to a club, you shouldn't be going to clubs, for example. And it's like, okay, like there's this scenario that if you find yourself going to a club, you're somewhat a bad person. And then, but if you spend time, I don't know, in the library, then you're a good person. Like, so sort of this idea that bad people are found in clubs, good people are found in libraries, or something like that. And it was just like this black and white, even like with fashion, as well. Like, let's talk
Mm.
about how going in church, you couldn't, I don't know, the length of your dress or your skirt mattered, because it
Mm-hmm.
shows it, I don't know, it shows a virtuous woman. And then if you're not doing that, then you're not, I guess. So like, just a lot of the black and white scenarios, just really, I can see how people are so put off by pursuing religion, because it's like, what
I
if,
was told, we were told, no pants, no pants or trousers in church, just dresses or skirts.
wow, okay, yeah, wow, that's interesting, that's interesting. Yeah, and it's just like because then, people also have this idea that to be Christian, then you need to like dress a certain way, be only in certain environments,
Mm-hmm.
and so almost like it's almost like you can't be, I don't know, like you can't be out there, you can't be a musician and be Christian. And like there, so people just have certain images, and of what a Christian should look like. um Even though, I don't know, looking back, or now being able to see both ways that the Christian faith is practiced, it's it to me, I see it more of like, do you hold the principles, do you actually practice them alone? You don't need to be monitored, and you don't need to be told, like, this is a bad place for you, this is a good place for you, like, because that's a preacher's interpretation of what's good or bad. um
But they're not used
and
to dealing with people like you and me who we don't deal with the black or white category. We deal with the gray zone. The gray
yeah.
zone where you're like, but it could be this or that. No, no, no. Or maybe
Yeah.
it's that or this. And then you're like, it's like the worst nightmare of someone who is like, no, this is how it's supposed to be. But you're like, but what about this? Are you
Mhm.
sure?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And going back to the thinking, like, sometimes religion takes away the thinking. Have you met people that um they they go to church on Sunday, they do their rituals, but in other areas of their life, they're not really Christian? And then
mhm.
I've met people who don't label themselves as Christian, but they hold their principles they hold really good principles, and they put them into practice, but they don't give themselves a label, maybe because they just don't go to church, or but they just do, they just have Christian habits they don't even realize they do. um so sometimes I find that very interesting, speaking of like that gray zone of, I just don't see it as black or white. Um, yeah,
Oh my goodness. I feel like we have a like there's gonna be part two, part three, part four, part
I
five.
know.
I don't know. There's so much to talk about. I still have so much that I'm thinking about, but I mean,
Yeah. No,
to
this
be
is
continued.
to be continued. There's a lot. There's a lot there. You know, to our listeners, if there's anything that has struck you from what we have just been talking about and you want to share with us, leave a message for us on our Instagram page, The Feminine Outliers. You can also write to us at thefeminine outliers@gmail.com. We are on Spotify, and our Spotify now has a question there about what you think of this episode. Give us your opinions directly to us. We welcome all kinds of feedback. We definitely want to give content that is something that is valuable to you, for you, your friends, your family. And while you're on Spotify and all the other major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, um, like us, subscribe, rate us.
Five
It's all
stars,
for
please.
what's that?
5 stars, please.
Oh, 5 stars. We're very specific. This is how much we want to do good. 5 stars only. Um, so no, this has been great. I've enjoyed exploring this concept of no concept of, religion. It's such a big part of our lives, and at some point we needed to talk about it because people identify with it, as we have talked about. But it has its pros and it has its cons or limitations, and I think it's just worth exploring, and we'll continue to do that in future episodes on this. So until next time, have fun, live large, and don't be afraid